have a session by Dr. AMEENA Ali on the effects of climate change on human rights. Dr. AMEENA Ali is the founder of Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. Over to you for your session, Dr. AMEENA.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so very much. I tried effortlessly to get the background up and I just couldn't, so bear with me today, but thank you so much. I really appreciate this invitation. Embassy ambassadors, consul generals, high commissioners, diplomats, dignitaries, honored guests, supporters, and local attendees, I want to welcome you. I want to thank you also for this opportunity to be able to speak in this forum on something that is very, very passionate and very near and dear to me, which is human and gender rights, especially its effect on climate change. I don't have a presentation to give to you because I'm going to make this personal. I'm going to speak to you about a young woman named Miriam. Now, Miriam is a bright and curious woman. She loves to laugh and has a beautiful smile. She is a very intriguing woman if you speak to her, and she definitely wants better for her life. But Miriam is 18 with 3 children. She is a survivor as a child bride and a recent female genital mutilation case brought to us. She is uneducated, unskilled, and because people came to her land and stole it from her, placing her on a reservation, she is now colonialized into an isolated and rural space. So she is truly what we would call a people that is left behind. And unfortunately, this happens so often in so many areas and tragic spaces that we have to be more mindful of this. So I'm going to speak about what she really is advantageous to in what she is suffering with. And this is going to develop into an understanding as to how mental health is affecting those that are dealing with climate change the worst. The work that I speak about addresses human rights and climate change advocacies. It begins with the impact of global warming on human rights, like the right to life and the right to physical and mental health. And then it enters into the socio-political and economic deficits that come from such actions. This follows the limits and possibilities of using human rights to address a problem, such as strategic plans to alter the path of destruction. My colleagues before me spoke very, very highly about hurrying up in this mission, making this a foregone conclusion of an expedient action. This also has allowed us to understand that the plan has to be the central argument that human rights can enjoy later on. This has to have a relative high level of dignity in finding solutions and to stop the atrophy under the matters of politics and economics. The aim of this goal in making this an expeditious goal is to study the imbalance between our private cultures of behavior and the public construct of what we see climate change as. When we speak about Miriam, we're speaking about a young lady that has not only been left behind, but pushed behind and been centralized into a demographic that is labeled as other. And this demographic is really the causation of most of the harm. They were already pushed behind before climate change became a source. They were already in a deficit before they understood what they are dealing with in their culture. But what we fail to understand is that this now pushes them even further behind and allows them to not only not understand where they are or where they will be, but it will not allow them to move any further. Miriam, being unskilled and uneducated, can't possibly know what it's like to go to school. In her understanding of that rural area, she can't possibly even know how to gain a vocation to better help her rural surroundings. Having 3 children, she has to monitor them. So where is the ability to go to school? Since she's in a rural area, there is no technologies that have been offered to that area for her to be even able to do this virtually. So when we speak about climate change, We have to speak about what she is given in this destruct of her environment. We have to talk about what it is that she is able to do, what she is willing to do, and what it is that she is facing in this calamity. One of the things that we have to understand, especially when it deals with women, is that women and children are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, because the poorest in the regions of the world that we have alienated and ostracized before climate change became a matter, now has to bear the primary responsibility of gathering the essentials. We're not even talking about luxuries. We're not talking about the shelter and in the more advantageous areas. We're not even talking about the ability to be able to go and live in a different place. We're talking about essentials: food, water, fuel supplies, and those things that we take for granted in our industrialized mindsets. They cannot afford access to new and modern technologies that we spoke about. They don't have the advantageousness to go into the city because then they have transportation costs that they can't afford. They don't have measures of having better, being better, and doing better, because what they have been given is lack thereof in our beginnings of this climate change talk. Women still have to birth children. So in this understanding of birthing children, you have to understand that hygienic and sanitation is a prime. In the rural areas or demographics that are left behind, where is that an importance? If we're scrounging for food and fuel supplies, how are we supposed to expect that these women are to get hygienic facilities to be able to birth their children? When infection sets in, how will they be able to afford the medicine to cure them? If they're not able to breastfeed, how are their newborn children able to feed? When we speak about climate change, we speak about less than in the areas that we call affluent. So what about those areas that are wrought with destruction prior to? What about those women that were struggling before climate change became a matter in society? What about those women that weren't able to get to those resources in a valued time to help the elders in those communities? How are they being looked at? If they had a disease before climate change was an issue, where were they getting medical care? Then we have the advantageousness of droughts, which happens because the environment is now less than in the now wrought area that they are in. So things like droughts that happen in mostly opulent, or maybe it used to be a plush area. Droughts caused by climate change make their work extremely hard, because now the resources that they thought they had is now drying up. Wells run dry, crop production declines, and fuel wood has to be collected from other sources, or industrialized companies have come in and taken what little that they had. Similarly, even more shortages of food because they're not able to grow the crops even in their regional area has now caused them to be even in more of a lack. Not to mention the children and the diminished nutrition that they will afford. So disease and famine will rot these children, and they will be brought up in an even further decline. So what we look at when we see the change that has to be met is we have to speak to these women first. One of the things that the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights does is we work in rural areas only. We specifically target and align rural areas as the specific cause for what we look to as far as solutions. We help those women first. And we do that intentionally, because once we get to those women, other women will be able to be helped. And because we're dealing with women, of course, if we help a woman, a village will be sufficed. So we have to understand the power of the woman in this understanding. But what we need to generate is the basis of knowing that all that I just talked about has a cause on their mental health. If we already deal with being young, being a mother, as we spoke about, uneducated, unvetted in skills, we're placed in an area where we have to live because we have been colonialized or we've been pushed out of our land. Climate change has now diminished that land. And now this isolated and rural area has now not only not afforded us the basic necessities as declared in the international human rights doctrines, but it has now pushed us in a more of a deficit in that area. We have to understand that these women are the first to die in survival of these climate tragedies, and their children are less likely to make it to adulthood in these same demographics. So we're losing people. We're losing people in this climate change. So we're looking at the land, we're looking at the trees, we're looking at fuel sources, but we're losing people. And if we lose that human resource, there won't be a need for anything to change in the climate because the people won't be there to see that change. So in speaking on that mental health, you have to understand that that mental health parameter is scarce. That mental health parameter is one of the things that we have to look to in changing the mindsets of the people that are working toward climate change. We have to come out of that moral injury of understanding that the same people that caused the climate depravity are the same people now caused to change that. You can't get well with the same mind that made you sick. So we have to get new and advantageous people in this place to change the cause and the direction of climate change. We have to allow the same people that are closest to the problem to be even closer to the solution in allowing their voice to be heard in the development of new ideologies. We have to allow these women, children, and youth to be able to speak to what they are dealing with. Bring big corporations out of their land and allow them to be the voice for what they need. This is going to be the will of the people and the continuation of the solution in a repeatable form. This will also allow the people to feel that their land is just as proud and just as good to them as the corporations want to bring out that natural resource or to steal and partition that land. This is not a closed democracy. This is something that can happen in this age. Stop letting big business and corporations come into our lands of refuge and allow the people to have a voice. The mental health behind it is of importance to the people. Women are crying out. Children are in need. And governments and big businesses are still just looking at them as just that, a resource, whether to be damaged or ostracized out, or the colonial mindset in their priority of privilege and entitlement is coming in and speaking for the people. That single story must stop. I am a woman. I have children. And although I have been blessed to be in a land of luxury, I am going back. The diaspora and the people of the diaspora need to go into these lands and fix what is broken with the voice of the people. If they don't, we are all in danger. We cannot use our entitlement and privilege to further the ego and the pride that we have. We have to begin to understand that we cannot change what we broke. We have to let other people come in and understand what they suffer with and what they need and fix it based on their voice. I thank you for hearing me, listening to the words, and making that change in your community. Allow those closest to the problem to be those closest to the solution, and use your power for good to empower them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. AMEENA Ali, for that powerful and another eye-opening session. You're doing an amazing job through the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. As you said, we need to work toward changing the minds of the people and make people understand that we are losing people to this climate change. And we need to allow women and youth to speak up and allow them to have a voice. Thank you so much for reminding us about the seriousness of the issue.